Hi, I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. Today I'm in Wolfboro, New Hampshire at the New Hampshire Boat Museum for their annual auction. This is where a lot of people from the local area donate boats and motors and accessories, and the museum sells them off to raise funds for the ongoing operations. It's a really interesting event, and there's going to be plenty of really cool boats here today, so let's go take a look. This boat is a 25-foot Chris Craft Sportsman, and it's a 1946, and it's powered by a Chris Craft W inboard 6-cylinder, 160 horsepower. You know, in the old days, Chris Craft was actually the largest builder of motorboats in the world. It was started in 1876 by Chris Smith, and he started powering his boats in 1896. They didn't go very fast, but it was a start. So this particular boat is interesting because it's the 25-foot Sportsman, and it was a very expensive and prestigious Chris Craft runabout built after the war. Very limited production boat. Only 208 were produced from 46 to 1950. Lots of mahogany, extensive hardware and fittings, and really nice shear lines. And this boat was custom ordered by the owner's grandfather with different features on it. Some of them included, like, it had a rare hatch on the front deck and some unique shifting capabilities. And you can see the cockpit is just beautiful. Just was really nicely laid out originally, and it's been well preserved. On the left side there, you can see a drop-down cabinet, which all of it was custom made for fishing lures. Nice cockpit, a lot of space for people to sit and relax. And here we see a shot of the engine. This is the Chris Craft W inboard 6-cylinder, 160 horsepower. So you can see very spacious as well. This particular boat is very rare in terms of it's all original, unrestored, had the original paperwork with it, and the complete documentation. So that's a very rare thing in the wood boat world. And sometimes when these are properly restored and kept up, they can go about 100,000, 125,000. So a very unusual boat. Now we're going to take a look at a 17-foot Chris Craft Sportsman. These boats, again, Chris Craft made a lot of boats. They're very popular. And this boat is powered with what they call a KL 6-cylinder, 105 horsepower inboard engine. And this is a nice little boat. It's a little 17-footer. And you find them in different parts of the country in different states of repair. This one obviously is in beautiful shape. Been very well cared for. The beautiful mahogany. It's got you can see the hardware on the front deck, kind of a neat windshield there, kind of a very plain, very straight windshield. By plain I mean plainer, not curved, if you will. This is a shot of the cockpit. You can see it's very simple. Got the steering wheel, and you have the instrumentation there. Just beautiful varnished mahogany. This would be seating for probably 2 to 3 people. And you can see the shift levers there in the middle on the left. And then as we pan back here, we get to the engine. Again, a lot of boat manufacturers don't make their own engines these days. In those days, sometimes they did. This, again, is the Chris Craft KL 6-cylinder, 105 horsepower. So that would move the boat right along. And here we see the seating in the back, which would accommodate other people. And here's the name, Phoenix. Every boat typically had a name, particularly in the old days. And this one was no different. Relatively straightforward. Now here's a 16-foot Century utility. Centuries of boat manufacturers have been around for a long time. They actually started making boats in 1926. And they made wood boats up to 1967. This one is obviously a wooden boat. It's what they call a twin cockpit. And the construction is a cedar plank over a white oak frame, so very strong. A lot of varnished mahogany, and aluminum framed windshield that you can see there on the front of the boat. And it's a light blue, kind of an unusual color, very pretty color actually. And that color is accented by the white boot stripe, boot stripe. So it's just a pretty color combination. And here, as we look inside of it, it's just a beautiful, beautiful boat. It's well finished. It's got the instrumentation. You see the shift lever there. Just a clean layout, just a fun layout. There's seating for 2 or 3 here in the front, and there's the engine box cover. This again had the 104 horsepower gray marine. Gray marines were very popular back at that time. And this one is the name Mr. C. And again, every boat had a name. And you can see it's a really well done, kind of a graphical thing. And this boat was recently surveyed, found to be in excellent condition and properly cared for. These boats can last a long time. And this one is a good example of that. It's the Centuries were known for that. Now here's a Chris Craft, 17-foot Chris Craft. This is what they call a model 817, and it was powered by a engine, what they call a K engine, which had 6 cylinders and produced 95 horsepower. Now this particular boat was again among the many boats that Chris Craft made back in those times, into the 1930s. This is 1938. And the hull and the deck on this particular boat were restored in the 1990s. And the engine was built in 1998. So that happens a lot, that people take the boats and they bring them back into top-notch condition. And along with the engine and the hull being restored, they restored the gauges and that sort of thing. Now you can see the result of this in this picture. The boat's really in really nice shape. We've got the banjo steering wheel there. You've got the instrumentation that's well laid out. This is the engine. The 817 on this particular boat meant that it was a 95 horsepower motor, which I guess was pretty good size in 1938. And here's the stern shot of it. Relatively straightforward boat, relatively flat bottom, a little bit of a V, but relatively flat. That's how you could get a fair amount of speed out of these boats. Now the next boat here is an 18-foot Chris Craft Continental with a convertible top. This boat is really in excellent condition. And one of the unique things about this boat was it had the same owner for almost 60 years. So that's pretty phenomenal. And it's kept in a boathouse. And keeping a wood boat in a boathouse makes a huge difference. This boat was originally delivered to a Chris Craft dealer in Greenwood Lake, New York. And as you may know, if you get into New York at all, in the Lakes region, that's kind of a lifestyle. Boating is a lifestyle. It's how they get around. This is a view into the cockpit of that Chris Craft Continental. Just beautiful. Steering wheel, the dash. You can see what they call the black alligator trim there. And then the gold seats. They had a real eye for color in those days. And as we pan back here, we pan back to the engine again, and just in beautiful shape. And this boat's name was Rusty. And you can see again a lot of the hardware there, just really very interesting hardware. This next boat here is a racing boat. It's a surviving original 1930 15-foot Crandall 135 Flyer. This was a single-stepped mahogany 135 cubic inch class racing hydroplane. It was built in the 1930s by Clinton Boat Works, which is in Clinton, Connecticut. It was designed by a naval architect named Bruce Crandall. And he made this series of boats called Flyers. And this one is understood to be one of the larger, if not the largest, Flyer. And this one has been restored a couple times to bring it back to and maintain it in its condition, and it was actually repowered along the way. And this is the engine that currently runs. It's a 262 cubic inch V6, which moves it right along. And here's a view into the cockpit. You can see the racing steering wheel and the shift and the exhaust and the instruments and that sort of thing. So it's really unique. Here's a 20-foot Chris Craft that this is a 2000 reproduction of a 20-foot 1938 racing runabout. Just a pretty boat with the blue and white combination there. It was built out of mahogany using a laminated West construction. So that's a very strong end result to building a boat that way. The chrome, most of it is a replated vintage on this boat, and the balance is new reproductions of the original chrome parts. So it's very original. They put new gauges in it, and they powered it with a 283, which is a classic V8 that produced 185 horse. So the boat is very dependable. Here's a picture into the cockpit. Again, you see the steering wheel, you see the gauges. Here's a picture of the engine. This is the 283 with the 185 horsepower. Moves it right along, and you can see it's just like brand new, and actually it is brand new. Now, this boat is in pristine shape. It actually never was launched into the water, so it's a great opportunity. Here's an 18-foot Chris Craft Holiday. Again, another one of the many Chris Crafts. This was powered with a KFL twin carb 6-cylinder, 131 horsepower engine. This boat is really in excellent condition. You can see by looking at the varnish and interesting bow shape to it. I think that's similar to a bullnose. And then they have the nice hardware, beautiful windshield there. This boat has a West system bottom on it, so a lot of boat owners of older wood boats would put a West system bottom on it, which really helped with any sort of leaking issues. And this boat had a conversion from 6 volt to 12 volt. That helps with the reliability. And as you can see, it's been very well cared for. Here's a view into the cockpit. Pretty straightforward. Not a lot of instrumentation, but all very well done. You see the steering wheel there and the shift on the floor. So we pan back here. It goes to the engine. And this boat just had a nice little engine to power it along. It's the 131 horsepower. And it's kind of a fun name here. In the old days, they used to do fun things with names and graphics and that sort of thing. And here's a view from the stern. Of interest is the hull shape and also the hardware. A lot of hardware on there that's all chrome and really nice. Now we're going to look at a 55 70-foot Chris Craft Sportsman. Now this is powered by a Hercules. You don't hear too much of Hercules motors anymore, but this is a Hercules 6-cylinder, 131 horsepower. Now here's a view of the cockpit. We're panning from the helm seat back. There's the engine box there that has the Hercules underneath. It was just 6-cylinder. This boat was bought completely restored and then maintained and used. So that's a really good combination. This is a stern shot looking back towards the bow of the boat. Very straightforward arrangement and a really nice boat. This next boat's kind of interesting. It's a 52 14-foot Sears Elgin kit boat. What a lot of people don't understand or haven't heard of is the fact that in the 50s, some of the large retailers like Sears and Montgomery Ward's would actually source boats from boat builders and sell them through their stores. And it was interesting because people could buy them on installments and so on. So it kind of made it convenient for them. This is a pretty boat. It's got the nice lines to it. It's got the mahogany deck, a curved windshield. And here's a view into the cockpit. You see the old controls. The little black lever there is for the shift, and then of course the red lever is for the power. And here's a common way that these were powered. It's an Evinrude. I think it might be a fast twin. I'm not sure. You see the adjustments for the various carburetor things there. Here's an interesting boat, a 12-foot Borum Speedy Craft. These boats were built, my understanding is that they were built by the Pycraft molded boats out of Canada. And they were built using a hot molded process. But what they would do is they would use birch or mahogany and lay up these 1/8 inch veneers over a mold. So they put the veneers into the mold, and then they staple in place, and then they glue them, and then they do the next veneer. So it was a process. At the end, they put a thick layer of rubber over, and they pump the air out to make everything just really seal nicely. So that's a very interesting way of building a boat. And here's a shot of the cockpit. You see, you don't have much. It's a racing boat. It's a little 12-footer. And but you do see over here, you see the steering wheel and then a unique throttle arrangement. I believe that's a kill throttle, deadman throttle, which means that if you release those two levers, as they are right now, the engine stops. Here's a neat boat. It's a 1960 Wage Runner Wolverine 14-foot. This was interesting because it was built by a firm in Grand Rapids. They built furniture originally, only furniture, because they had a lot of natural materials and some really good people with wood. And they branched out early on to kind of move counter-cyclical. And this is the sort of boat that they would build. And it's a pretty little boat, all out of wood. You can see it's kind of spacious and would go pretty easily without a lot of horsepower in the engines. It's unusual because you don't see too many of these. Now here's the 13.5-foot homemade boat from the 1950s. And this is interesting because it was made from plans. And back in the old days, if you will, there used to be places you could buy plans to build boats. And here's kind of a nice example how someone got into boating, pretty cheap. This one here is a Pinion car topper. It's a 12-foot, and it has a 3-horsepower engine with it, and it was purchased in several years ago, and then the boat was restored in 2013. So that's why the varnish looks so good on this boat. And for a boat that old, it looks great. Here's a 49 Pinion dinghy, a little smaller than the one we just looked at. A little smaller than the car topper. It's again restored like the car topper was. And these are just nice little boats. They were well made and they've stood the test of time. Now here's a 1955 Old Town canoe. Now Old Town has been building canoes for over 100 years. And they're very well known for their canoes and the durability of those canoes. This is a nice shot of some just classic looking canoes. Here's a 1914 17-foot Old Town. So this one's even older than the one we just looked at. And I guess it's a testimony to Old Town's manufacturing techniques and materials that a boat this old from 1914 is still around. And you could see how it could absolutely deliver a lot of utility and a lot of fun. And it obviously had to be well crafted. This is another canoe at the auction. It's a Mansfield, and this boat I think has really nice lines to it. Again, it's a traditional color combination, and typically these boats were built from canvas. Here's one that's built out of aluminum. These are Starcraft, and Starcraft really was a good company when it came to aluminum construction. And there's a nice shot of a Starcraft canoe, and here's another shot of one. And these were popular around camps and that sort of thing because they were basically bulletproof. They would could go over rocks or trees or anything like that. Now here's an 11-foot aluminum boat. This is the way a lot of people get started. There's nothing really unusual about this boat other than it's a good, inexpensive way for people to get started, and a lot of people did with that. And you see these sometimes at the auctions. It's got a little, I think that's like a 3-horsepower on the back there. And it's just a great boat for fishing and all that sort of thing. It's just fun. Now, there were a lot of old outboards there. This is a Johnson. This is fairly valuable. Oftentimes they went from like $50 to $100. But you can see it's kind of neat. You don't see these type of motors anymore. The little controls at the top. Here's a Neptune. This is a brand you don't hear about anymore because they don't make them anymore. Here's another brand, Champion. Again, you don't see these any place other than where there's fresh water or an auction. And then here's a Mercury. Mercury's is still a very big brand, and this is an old outboard with the green and the gold combination to it. And then finally, here's an Evinrude Fast Wind, and this was a very popular motor. Got the clamshell hatches on it, and it's got some neat details. Let's look at this Correct Craft now. Barracuda. This is a popular boat, especially for skiers. It was powered by a Chrysler 210 horsepower, and it's obviously red and white, really sharp combination. A lot of chrome on the hood there, the front deck, I mean. And you can see the curved windshield. This boat's in just a beautiful shape. Very popular ski boat. We're looking now into the cockpit. It's got all the instrumentation, and it's got the steering wheel, of course, and it's well laid out, and just a nice small boat, versatile boat. We see the cockpit seating, a couple helm chairs there. We're panning back to the engine box, and that, of course, is where the Chrysler 210 horsepower. Chrysler was a very common and well-respected marine power source. This next boat's a 23-foot Chris Craft Lancer that was restored. This, in contrast to the other Chris Crafts, has a very deep V hull to it at 24 degree. Now that makes it can be a little slower. It takes more power to drive a deep V, but it's a little smoother than the hulls that came before it that have a little more flat angle to them. Boats like this, it's great when you find them on a lake because there's no corrosion on them, and you can see this one is just in great shape, and it's well laid out. Captain's chairs, a nice wide cockpit, and well maintained. You can see there's plenty of room. This again is a traditional inboard setup. You don't see too many of those anymore on this size foot. A lot of them are inboard outboards, but as you can see from this shot from the stern, this is resprayed in flag blue. Beautiful job, deep V hull, just a pretty boat. Here's an unusual boat, an 18-foot Herreshoff motor launch. This is from the 1950s, and there were only apparently 2 of these that were made in fiberglass. And this one was a motor launch, powered by a 4-cylinder engine. It was unusual because it was built to order for a man that was associated with Hertz Rent-A-Car, and also with a famous place there in the region, which is called Castle in the Clouds. You can see the layout is traditional, very straightforward, but very easy to live with. And here's the stern shot. Obviously a very different type of boat than many of the other boats at the New Hampshire boat auction. Now here's the next boat, the 1962 13-foot whaler. Again, a whaler in itself is not unusual, but a 1962 whaler is. And so this one's been, since it's on the lake, that helps longevity quite a bit. It's got a 35 horsepower motor on it. As you can see as we pan it, just a fun boat. And it's very unusual to find one of this age. Now here's another boat, a 1981 launch. This again is an unusual boat and kind of representative of the eclectic connection or combination of things that's there at these auctions. This is a 1981, it's a fiberglass launch, and it's got a diesel engine. It was originally steam, but it was converted to diesel. And as we pan the cockpit, you can see just what a real comfortable boat this is. Plenty of seating, everything's upholstered. It's not a high-speed boat, but it's just a really interesting boat and one that you wouldn't typically see. Well, it's time to wrap up the show today here at the New Hampshire Boat Museum in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. It's been a really interesting show. Lots of cool boats and motors and accessories. So if you are into this sort of thing, you might check the web to see when their next auction is coming up. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments on the show, please visit us at www.smartboatingus.com. Thank you.